The snow fell in thick, relentless flakes outside the two-story colonial home in Concord, Massachusetts, blanketing the cul-de-sac in a quiet that felt both serene and oppressive. It was December 23rd, 2024, 2 days before Christmas, and the air carried the sharp bite of winter, mingling with the faint scent of pine from the wreaths nailed to every door on Maple Street. Inside the house, Emily Carter stood in her childhood bedroom, now a guest room with faded floral wallpaper and a twin bed that creaked under her weight. At 32, she felt like a guest in more ways than one. Her suitcase lay open on the floor, stuffed with clothes and a dozen carefully wrapped Christmas gifts, each labeled with a name in her neat, looping handwriting. She'd spent weeks picking them out. Hand-knit scarves from a local shop in Boston's North End, a leather-bound journal for her brother, a set of artisanal soaps for her sister-in-law, and a model train for her nephew, who'd been obsessed with locomotives since he was 3. The gifts were her way of saying, "I see you," even if she wasn't sure her family saw her back. Emily ran her fingers over the wrapping paper, the crinkle of it loud in the quiet room. Downstairs, the clatter of dishes and her mother's voice, sharp, directing, cut through the hum of Christmas carols playing on the kitchen radio. "Lila, move the centerpiece, it's blocking the view," her mother called, orchestrating the annual Christmas Eve dinner preparations with the precision of a conductor. Emily's sister, Lila, responded with a laugh, her voice bright and teasing, as if the stress of the holidays was just another game she'd win. Emily zipped up her coat, a navy wool thing she'd bought on sale last winter, and glanced at herself in the mirror. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands escaping at the temples, and her hazel eyes looked tired, shadowed by the weight of a year that hadn't gone as planned. She'd lost her marketing job in September, a casualty of corporate restructuring, and though she'd freelanced since, the gigs were inconsistent, leaving her bank account lean and her confidence leaner. Coming home for Christmas was supposed to be a reset, a chance to reconnect with her family, her parents, her older brother Matt, his wife Sarah, and their son Ethan. But standing here, surrounded by gifts she'd stretched her budget to afford, she felt like an outsider in her own story. The doorbell rang, and Emily heard the shuffle of feet, the burst of greetings as Matt and his family arrived. Ethan's high-pitched squeal, "Grandma, I got a new train book," brought a small smile to her lips. She grabbed the stack of gifts, balancing them in her arms, and headed downstairs, the wooden steps creaking under her boots. The living room was a haze of warmth and chaos. A towering Christmas tree stood in the corner, dripping with tinsel and ornaments, some of which Emily had made as a kid, clumsy clay stars and pipe-cleaner reindeer. The fireplace crackled, casting a glow over the plaid sofa where her father, Tom, sat nursing a glass of bourbon, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he scrolled through his phone. Matt and Sarah were shedding their coats, Ethan darting around their legs, while Lila arranged a tray of appetizers on the coffee table, mini quiches and shrimp skewers, the kind of thing her mother insisted on for elegance. "Hey, Em," Matt said, catching her eye as she set the gifts under the tree. His voice was warm but distracted, his attention already pulled to Ethan, who was tugging at his sleeve. "You made it." "Yeah, drove up yesterday," Emily said, brushing snowflakes from her sleeve. "Traffic on I-95 was a nightmare." Matt nodded, but his eyes were on his son. "Ethan, buddy, slow down. You'll knock something over." Sarah, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, offered a polite smile. "Good to see you, Emily. How's Boston?" "It's Boston," Emily said, forcing a laugh. She wanted to say more about the layoffs, the late nights pitching to clients who never called back, the way her apartment felt too quiet. But Sarah was already turning to compliment their mother's table setting. Emily's mother, Diane, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a red and green apron. Her silver hair was pinned up, and her face held the determined cheer of someone who'd been planning this dinner since Labor Day. "Emily, you're lurking," she said, her tone half teasing, half scolding. "Come help with the salad." "I'm not lurking," Emily said, but she followed her mother into the kitchen, the gifts left unmentioned under the tree. The kitchen smelled of roasted turkey and cranberry sauce, the counters cluttered with mixing bowls and a half-empty bottle of Chardonnay. Lila, in a red sweater that matched the holiday decor, was chopping cucumbers, her engagement ring glinting under the pendant lights. "You're late to the party," Lila said, grinning. "I've been slaving away for hours." "You've been here for 20 minutes, Emily shot back, grabbing a knife to slice tomatoes. It was an old rhythm, this banter with her younger sister, but it felt strained, like a song they hadn't practiced in years. Lila was 28, newly engaged to a finance guy named Greg, and her life seemed to move in a straight line. Job at a PR firm, apartment in Cambridge, wedding plans that dominated every family conversation. Dinner was served at 7. The dining room table groaning under the weight of Diane's spread. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, and a pecan pie that had taken 2 attempts to perfect. The family sat around the table, Ethan fidgeting in his booster seat, and Tom said a brief grace, his voice steady but perfunctory. Emily sat between Lila and Sarah, her plate piled high, though her appetite was thin. The conversation flowed, but it flowed around her. Matt and Sarah talked about Ethan's preschool, his latest obsession with trains. Lila recounted a story about Greg's proposal in Nantucket, complete with a sunset and a string quartet. Diane fussed over the food, asking if the turkey was too dry, while Tom nodded along, chiming in about his golf game. Emily tried to join in, mentioning a project she'd pitched to a local non-profit, but her words seemed to dissolve into the clink of forks and glasses. "Did you see the gifts under the tree?" Emily asked during a lull, her voice brighter than she felt. "I got something for everyone." "Oh, that's sweet," Diane said, but her eyes were on Ethan, who was smearing mashed potatoes on his plate. "Ethan, honey, use your spoon." Matt glanced at the tree, then back at his plate. "Nice, Em. Thanks." The moment passed, and the conversation turned to Lila's wedding venue. Emily's chest tightened, a familiar ache she couldn't name. She'd spent hours choosing those gifts, wrapping them late at night in her tiny apartment, imagining the smiles they'd bring. But no one asked about them. No one noticed. It was as if she'd placed a piece of herself under the tree, and it had gone invisible. After dinner, the family migrated to the living room for dessert and coffee. Ethan tore around the room, clutching his train book, while the adults settled into their usual roles. Diane directing, Tom retreating, Matt and Sarah doting, Lila charming. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, her coffee cooling in her hands, watching the scene like a play she hadn't been cast in. "Hey, Em, you okay?" Lila asked, plopping down beside her. Her tone was light, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Yeah, just tired," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Long drive." "You should have flown," Lila said, sipping her wine. "Greg says it's so much easier." Emily nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Under the tree, the gifts sat untouched, their ribbons gleaming in the firelight. She'd spent $300 she didn't really have, thinking it would mean something. But maybe it didn't, maybe she didn't. The night wound down, and Matt's family left first, Ethan half asleep in Sarah's arms. Lila lingered, helping Diane clean up, while Emily carried plates to the kitchen. As she scraped leftovers into a Tupperware, her mother's voice broke the silence. "Emily, you're so quiet tonight," Diane said, her hands in soapy water. "Everything okay?" Emily hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to say it, how she felt like a ghost in this house, how the gifts she'd poured her heart into were just props in someone else's holiday. But instead she said, "Just tired, Mom." Diane nodded, accepting the answer without pushing. Emily finished helping, then climbed the stairs to her room, the weight of the evening pressing on her shoulders. She sat on the bed, staring at the empty suitcase, and made a decision. The next morning, Christmas Eve, she woke early. The house was quiet, the snow still falling outside. She gathered the gifts from under the tree, their weight heavy in her arms, and loaded them into her car. The local shelter in Lowell, a 20-minute drive, was accepting donations for families in need. She'd seen their flyer at the grocery store, a call for toys, clothes, anything to make the season brighter. As she drove, the radio played Silent Night, and the snow swirled across the windshield. Emily didn't know what she was doing, not exactly, but she knew she couldn't sit through another dinner, another Christmas, feeling like she didn't matter. The gifts weren't just things. They were her effort, her love, her hope. If her family couldn't see that, maybe someone else would. At the shelter, a volunteer named Rosa greeted her, her face lighting up as Emily handed over the bags. "This is incredible," Rosa said, peering at the wrapped packages. "You're going to make a lot of kids happy." Emily smiled. A real one this time, though her eyes stung. "I hope so," she said. Back in her car, she sat for a moment, the engine idling. The shelter's lights glowed through the snow, and for the first time in days, she felt lighter, like she'd shed something heavier than the gifts. But as she drove back to Concord, a new question settled in her chest. What now? Christmas was tomorrow, and she'd have to face her family, the empty space under the tree, and the consequences of what she'd done. The snow had slowed to a light dusting by the time Emily pulled back into the driveway of her parents' house in Concord, Massachusetts, on Christmas Eve morning, December 24th, 2024. The cul-de-sac was a picture of suburban winter, icicles hung from gutters, and a neighbor's inflatable Santa swayed in the wind. Emily's breath fogged in the cold as she sat in her car, the engine ticking as it cooled. The shelter's warmth, Rosa's grateful smile, the faint sound of children laughing in the community room lingered in her mind. But so did the weight of what she'd done. The gifts were gone, donated to strangers, and the tree in the living room would be bare when her family gathered tomorrow. Her stomach churned, a mix of defiance and dread. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and coffee, the remnants of her mother's breakfast preparations. Emily slipped off her boots, careful not to track snow onto the hardwood, and hung her coat on the rack. The living room was quiet, the Christmas tree's lights twinkling against the ornaments, but the absence of the gifts she'd placed there last night was stark. The tree skirt, red with embroidered snowflakes, looked too empty, like a stage missing its props. "Emily! Is that you?" Her mother's voice called from the kitchen. Diane was at the counter, rolling out dough for cinnamon rolls, her apron dusted with flour. The radio played Jingle Bell Rock, and the kitchen felt like a scene from a holiday movie, all warmth and order. But Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't ready for questions. "Yeah, just me," Emily said, forcing her voice to stay. Steady, she grabbed a mug from the cabinet, pouring coffee to keep her hands busy. "You were out early," Diane said, glancing up. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the way they did when she sensed something off. "Everything okay?" "Just needed some air," Emily said, sipping the coffee. It was too hot, burning her tongue, but she welcomed the distraction. "Snow's pretty out there." Diane nodded, returning to her dough. "Don't stay out too long. We've got the neighbors coming over tonight, and I need help with the hors d'oeuvres." Emily murmured agreement, her thoughts elsewhere. She'd planned to tell her family about the donations, eventually. But not yet. Not when... The act felt so raw, like a wound she wasn't sure was a victory or a mistake. She retreated to the living room, where her father, Tom, was reading the Boston Globe by the fire, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Morning, kiddo," he said without looking up. "You see the forecast? More snow tomorrow." "Great," Emily said, her tone flat. She sat on the couch, tucking her legs under her, and stared at the tree. The empty space felt louder than the carols on the radio. By midday, the house buzzed with activity. Lila arrived with Greg, her fiancé, who carried a bottle of expensive-looking wine and a grin that showed too many teeth. Matt, Sarah, and Ethan were due later for Christmas Eve dinner, a smaller affair before the big Christmas Day gathering. Emily helped set the table, arranging silverware and folding napkins, but her mind kept drifting to the shelter, to the kids who'd open her gifts. Tomorrow. She wondered if the train set would make a boy like Ethan smile. Dinner was a blur of small talk and clinking glasses. The neighbors, the Harrisons, joined them, their voices loud with holiday cheer. Emily smiled when prompted, laughed at Greg's story about a client's holiday party gone wrong, but she felt like she was watching the scene through glass. No one mentioned the missing gifts, and she wondered if they'd even noticed. The thought stung, but it also fueled the quiet resolve growing inside her. Christmas morning dawned grey and cold, the snow piling higher outside. Emily woke to the sound of Ethan's footsteps thundering down the stairs, his voice shrill with excitement. "Santa came! Santa came!" he shouted, and despite everything, Emily smiled. She pulled on a sweater and joined the family in the living room, where Ethan was already circling the tree, his pajamas wrinkled and his hair a mess. But the mood shifted when Matt knelt by the tree, peering at the empty skirt. "Where's the stuff from last night?" he asked, his brow furrowing. Didn't you put gifts down here?" The room went quiet, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Diane looked up from her coffee. Lila paused mid-bite of a cinnamon roll, and Sarah glanced at Matt, confused. Emily's throat tightened, but she'd known this moment was coming. "I donated them," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "to the shelter in Lowell. They needed stuff for kids and families." The silence stretched, heavy as the snow outside. Ethan, oblivious, tugged at Sarah's sleeve, asking about Santa, but the adult's eyes were on Emily. "Donated them?" Diane repeated, her tone sharp with disbelief. "All of them?" "Yeah," Emily said, meeting her mother's gaze. "I thought it would mean more to people who needed it." Matt ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. That's noble. But you didn't think to ask?" Ethan was excited about that train set. "I didn't know it was a train set." Ethan piped up, his face crumpling. "Was it for me?" Emily's heart sank. "It was, buddy," she said softly. "But there are kids who don't get anything for Christmas. I wanted to help them." Ethan's lip quivered, and Sarah pulled him close, her expression unreadable. Lila set her plate down, her eyes wide. That's a big move, like really big. Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't think I needed to," Emily said, her voice catching. I don't know. I thought it would be okay." "Okay." Diane's voice rose, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "Emily, those were for us, your family. You spent money you don't have, and then you just gave it away." The accusation hit like a slap. Emily felt her face flush, a mix of shame and defiance. "I spent money I don't have because I wanted to do something nice for you all, but no one even noticed them last night. No one asked. It was like I wasn't even here." "That's not fair," Matt said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We were busy, Em. It's Christmas. Things get hectic." "Hectic," Emily echoed, her voice low. "Yeah, I know." Tom, who'd been silent, cleared his throat. "Let's all take a breath," he said, his voice calm but strained. "Emily, I get you meant well, but this is a lot to process. Maybe you could have talked to us first." The conversation spiraled from there, a mix of hurt and misunderstanding. Lila tried to mediate, suggesting they could replace the gifts, but Diane's frustration lingered, her words sharp about responsibility and communication. Matt focused on Ethan, who was now quietly crying, and Sarah's silence felt like judgment. Emily wanted to explain the loneliness, the need to feel seen, but the words wouldn't come. By noon, the tension hadn't eased. The family opened the few gifts from Santa, stocking stuffers, a board game, a scarf for Diane, but the mood was subdued. Emily excused herself, claiming a headache, and retreated to her room. She sat on the bed, staring out the window at the snow-covered street, and wondered if she'd made a mistake. The shelter's gratitude had felt right, but her family's reaction made her question everything. Downstairs, she heard Lila's voice, soft and insistent, talking to Diane. "She's going through something, Mom. You know she's had a rough year." Emily's chest tightened. She didn't want pity, but she didn't know what she wanted anymore. As the day wore on, Emily decided she couldn't stay in the house, not with the weight of everyone's disappointment. She grabbed her coat and drove to a coffee shop in downtown. Concord, a cozy place with exposed brick and the smell of roasted beans. Sitting by the window, she sipped a latte and scrolled through her phone, landing on a text from Rosa at the shelter. "The kids loved the gifts. You made their Christmas. Thank you." Emily's eyes stung, and she set the phone down, staring at the snow falling outside. She'd wanted to do something good, something that mattered. But now she faced a new obstacle, rebuilding the trust she'd fractured with her family. Christmas wasn't over, and neither was her story. The coffee shop in downtown Concord was a refuge, its brick walls and steaming espresso machine a buffer against the chill of Christmas Day 2024. Emily sat by the window, her latte now cold. The foam collapsed into a thin film. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the streets a pristine white, dotted with families in puffy coats and kids dragging sleds toward the hill by the Old North Bridge. The text from Rosa at the Lowell shelter, "The kids loved the gifts. You made their Christmas," glowed on her phone screen, but it did little to ease the knot in her chest. Her family's disappointment, Ethan's tears, her mother's sharp words, they replayed in her mind like a song stuck on repeat. Emily traced her finger along the rim of her mug, wondering how a single day could feel so heavy. She'd wanted to do something good, to give meaning to a holiday that had felt hollow for years. But now, sitting alone in a coffee shop, while her family likely dissected her actions back home, she wasn't sure what she'd accomplished. The shelter kids had their gifts, but her family had an empty tree, and maybe an emptier opinion of her. The bell above the door jingled, and Emily glanced up to see a familiar figure. Sarah, her sister-in-law, bundled in a cream-colored coat, her blonde hair tucked under a knit hat. Sarah scanned the room, spotted Emily, and hesitated before walking over, her boots leaving faint wet prints on the wood floor. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah asked, her voice neutral but not unkind. Emily gestured to the empty chair, surprised. "Sure. How'd you know I was here?" Matt said. "You'd probably come here," Sarah said, pulling off her gloves. "You used to sneak off to this place when we were in high school, right? When things got tense at home." Emily managed a small smile. "Yeah, old habits." Sarah ordered a cappuccino and sat across from Emily, her hands folded on the table. The silence between them wasn't hostile, but it wasn't comfortable either. Emily braced herself, expecting a lecture about Ethan or the gifts, but Sarah's expression was softer, almost curious. "I'm not here to yell," Sarah said, as if reading Emily's mind. "I just wanted to understand what happened yesterday. Why'd you give everything away?" Emily's first instinct was to deflect, but Sarah's tone, calm, not accusing, caught her off guard. She took a breath, the coffee shop's warmth, loosening the words she'd held back. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding pathetic," she started. "Last night at dinner, it was like I was invisible. I spent weeks picking out those gifts, thinking they'd mean something, but no one noticed them. No one asked. I felt like I didn't matter." Sarah's brow furrowed, but she didn't interrupt. Emily continued, her voice low. "I've had a rough year, Sarah. Lost my job, barely scraping by. Coming home was supposed to feel good, like I belonged somewhere, but it didn't. So when I saw that flyer for the shelter, I thought, maybe those gifts could mean more to someone else." Sarah nodded slowly, sipping her cappuccino. "I get it," she said. "Or at least I'm trying to. But Ethan, he's 5. He doesn't understand why his aunt's gift isn't under the tree. And Matt, he's hurt, Em. He thinks you're pulling away from us. I'm not, Emily said quickly, then paused. Or maybe I am, I don't know. It's hard to feel close when everyone's so wrapped up in their own lives. Lila's got her wedding, you and Matt have Ethan, Mom's got her perfect holiday. Where do I fit in? Sarah leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. You fit in, Em. You always have. But you're right, it gets hectic. We're not great at showing it sometimes. Matt's been worried about you, you know. He mentioned the layoff, how you've been quiet about it. Emily looked down at her mug, her throat tight. He didn't say anything to me. He's not great at that, Sarah admitted, a small smile tugging at her lips. But he cares. We all do. What you did with the gifts, it was generous, really generous. But it also felt like you were saying you didn't want to be part of our Christmas. That's not what I meant, Emily said, her voice cracking. I just wanted to feel like I was doing something that mattered. You do matter, Sarah said firmly. To Ethan, especially. He was so excited you were coming home. He kept talking about showing you his train book. Emily's eyes stung, and she blinked hard, focusing on the window. A group of kids outside laughed as they tossed snowballs, their voices muffled but bright. She thought of Ethan's crumpled face, the way he'd looked at her when she admitted the train set was gone. I didn't mean to hurt him, Emily said softly. Or any of you. I know, Sarah said. But maybe you can explain that. To them, not just the donation, but why. The real why. Emily nodded, though the thought of facing her family again made her stomach twist. Sarah reached across the table, her hand brushing Emily's arm. Come back with me. It's Christmas. Let's figure this out together. The drive back to the house was quiet, the radio off, the only sound the crunch of tires on snow. Emily's mind raced. Sarah's words had cracked open something she hadn't wanted to face, the fear that her family didn't need her, that she was an afterthought in their busy lives. But Sarah's effort to find her, to listen, suggested otherwise. Maybe she'd misread them as much as they'd misread her. Back at the house, the living room was a mess of wrapping paper and half-eaten cinnamon rolls. Ethan was on the floor, playing with a new toy truck, while Matt and Lila sat on the couch, scrolling through their phones. Diane was in the kitchen, clattering dishes, and Tom was napping in his recliner. The tree's lights blinked. The empty skirt a silent accusation. Hey, Emily said, her voice tentative as she stepped into the room. Matt looked up, his expression guarded but not angry. Hey, you okay? Yeah, Emily said, glancing at Ethan. Can we talk, all of us? Lila set her phone down, her eyes curious. Sure, Em, what's up? Emily took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly. I owe you all an apology. I didn't mean to ruin Christmas. I gave the gifts away because I felt like I wasn't part of this, like I was just here. But I was wrong to do it without talking to you. Ethan looked up, clutching his truck. Why'd you give my train away, Aunt Em? Emily knelt beside him, her heart aching. I'm so sorry, buddy. I thought it would help kids who don't have toys, but I should have kept yours. I'll make it up to you, okay? Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes still wary. Matt reached over, ruffling his son's hair. It's okay, Em, he said. We were just surprised. You've always been the thoughtful one. It threw us. Diane appeared in the doorway, wiping her, hands on a dish towel. Emily, I wish you'd told us how you were feeling, she said, her voice softer than yesterday. We're not mind readers. I know, Emily said. I'm not great at saying it out loud. The conversation wasn't easy. There were awkward pauses, hurt feelings aired, but it was a start. Emily promised to take Ethan to the toy store after Christmas, and Lila suggested they volunteer at the shelter together. For the first time in days, Emily felt a flicker of hope, like maybe she could find her place again. But as the day ended, with the family watching A Christmas Story and the snow falling outside, Emily knew the road ahead wasn't simple. She'd taken a stand, but now she had to rebuild, not just with her family, but with herself. The morning after Christmas, December 26, 2024, dawned crisp and bright in Concord, Massachusetts, the snow-covered lawns of Maple Street glistening under a pale sun. Emily stood on her parents' front porch, her breath visible in the frigid air, as she zipped up her navy coat and adjusted her scarf. The cul-de-sac was quiet, save for the distant scrape of a neighbor's shovel and the chatter of sparrows in the bare maple trees. She glanced at the house, where the living room windows glowed faintly, and felt a mix of resolve and unease. Yesterday's conversation had cracked the ice between her and her family, but the chill lingered. Today, she had a promise to keep, to Ethan. Inside, the house was still waking up. The remnants of Christmas Day, crumpled wrapping paper, an empty pie tin cluttered the living room. Ethan was sprawled on the rug, flipping through his train book, his small fingers tracing the glossy images of steam engines. Emily had promised to take him to the toy store in West Concord to replace the train set she'd donated, a gesture she hoped would mend the hurt she'd seen in his eyes. "Ready, buddy?" Emily called, kneeling beside him. Ethan looked up, his brown eyes cautious but curious. "Is it going to be a cool train?" he asked, clutching his book. "The coolest," Emily said, forcing a grin, "maybe even one with a whistle." Ethan's face lit up, and he scrambled to his feet, tugging on his boots. Matt, nursing a coffee at the kitchen table, gave Emily a nod. "Thanks for this, Em," he said. "He's been talking about trains non-stop." "No problem," Emily replied, though her stomach twisted. She hadn't told Matt how tight her budget was. Freelancing had barely covered her rent, and the $50 she'd set aside for the toy store felt like a stretch. Still, she wanted to make this right. The drive to West Concord was short, the roads lined with snowbanks and festive decorations. Ethan chattered in the back seat, pointing out a snowman with a Patriots cap and a mailbox shaped like a gingerbread house. Emily listened, her hands tight on the steering wheel, trying to focus on his excitement rather than the nagging voice in her head. "You messed up. You can't afford this. What if they're still mad?" The toy store, a small shop called Play Haven, was a kaleidoscope of color, its shelves stuffed with dolls, puzzles, and model kits. Christmas music still played softly, and a clerk in a Santa hat restocked a display of board games. Ethan darted to the train section, his eyes wide as he scanned the boxes. Freight trains, passenger trains, even a miniature Hogwarts Express. "This one," he said, pointing to a mid-price set with a red locomotive and 3 cars. It was $45, more than Emily had hoped, but she nodded. "Looks perfect," she said, handing it to the clerk. As she swiped her card, her phone buzzed with a low balance alert. She ignored it, focusing on Ethan's grin as he hugged the box to his chest. Back at the house, Ethan tore into the packaging, setting up the tracks on the living room floor. Emily helped, snapping the pieces together, her fingers brushing against the cold plastic. The tree's lights cast a warm glow over the scene, and for a moment, it felt like the Christmas she'd imagined, connected, meaningful. "Watch this, Aunt Em," Ethan said, flipping the switch. The train chugged along the oval track, its tiny headlight flickering. Emily clapped, her heart lifting, but the moment was interrupted by the doorbell. Diane answered it, revealing Rosa from the Lowell shelter, bundled in a parka, her face flushed from the cold. "Emily," she called, spotting her by the tree. "I tried texting, but I was nearby, so I thought I'd stop by." Emily stood, surprised. "Rosa, hey, what's up?" Rosa hesitated, glancing at the family now watching from the couch. "It's about the gift you donated. There was a mix-up at the shelter. Some of the packages got distributed to the wrong families, and, well, a couple of parents are upset. They're saying the gifts were too nice, that it made others feel bad. I hate to ask, but could you come by and help sort it out?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Upset? I thought the kids loved them." "They did," Rosa said quickly. But it's complicated. Some families felt overlooked and it's causing tension. I could use your help to smooth things over. Matt frowned, setting his coffee down. What's this about, Em? Emily explained briefly, her voice tight. I donated the gifts to the shelter in Lowell. Now there's some issue with how they were handed out. Diane's lips pursed and Leela, sitting cross-legged on the couch, raised an eyebrow. You didn't check how they'd distribute them? She asked. I didn't think I had to, Emily said, her face heating. I just wanted to help. Rosa shifted uncomfortably. You did help a lot. This is just a hiccup. If you could come by this afternoon, maybe talk to the families. I'll go, Emily said, though the thought of facing more judgment made her chest tighten. She looked at Ethan, who was still focused on his train, oblivious to the tension. Can we finish this later, buddy? Okay, Ethan said, his voice small. He didn't look up, and Emily felt a pang of guilt. The drive to Lowell was quiet, the snow-dusted industrial buildings a stark contrast to Concord's quaint charm. The shelter was a low brick building, its parking lot crowded with volunteers, unloading donations. Inside, the community room was warm but chaotic, with kids playing and parents talking in hushed, frustrated tones. Rosa led Emily to a small office where two women sat, their faces drawn. This is Maria and Tanya, Rosa said. They're parents from the shelter. Maria, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, spoke first. Your gifts were nice, but my kids got socks while others got toys. They're asking why they didn't get something special. Tanya nodded, her voice sharper. It's not fair. Some families got fancy stuff and we got leftovers. It made my daughter cry. Emily's throat tightened. I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't mean to cause any hurt. I just wanted to give something to kids who needed it. Rosa explained the mix-up. In the rush to distribute gifts, some were handed out randomly, creating uneven expectations. Emily listened, her mind racing. She'd acted on impulse, thinking her gesture would be a simple good deed, but now it felt like another misstep. I'll fix this, Emily promised, though she wasn't sure how. She spent the afternoon helping. Rosa resort the remaining donations, talking to parents and apologizing where needed. Some were grateful, others skeptical, but the work grounded her, reminding her why she donated the gifts in the first place. Back in Concord that evening, the house was quiet. The family gathered for leftovers. Emily recounted the shelter visit, expecting criticism, but Matt surprised her. Sounds like you're trying to make it right, he said. That's something. Diane's expression softened. Just be careful, Emily. Good intentions don't always mean good outcomes. Emily nodded, her thoughts on Ethan's train, the shelter families, and the fragile bridge she was rebuilding with her own. She'd taken a step today, but the path ahead was still uncertain, and the weight of her choices felt heavier than ever. The last days of December 2024 in Concord, Massachusetts, carried a quiet that felt like the world holding its breath. The snow, piled high from days of flurries, blanketed Maple Street in a soft white, softening the edges of the colonial houses and their glowing porch lights. Emily Carter stood in her parents' driveway on December 27th, her boots crunching against the icy gravel, her breath clouding in the morning chill. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and the distant hum of a snowblower underscored the stillness. Her car was packed for the drive back to Boston, but she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. The events of the past few days, from the Christmas Eve dinner to the shelter mix-up, had left her raw, but also determined to find closure before the new year. Inside, the house was a warm contrast to the cold outside. The Christmas tree still stood in the living room, its lights twinkling against the ornaments, though the empty skirt beneath it no longer felt like an accusation. Emily's family had softened since their tense Christmas morning confrontation, but the air still held a fragile tension, like a melody waiting for its final note. She'd spent yesterday at the Lowell shelter, sorting out the donation mishap, with Rosa, And the experience had shifted something in her. The parents' frustrations, Maria's tired eyes, Tanya's sharp words had been humbling. But their gratitude when she'd helped redistribute the gifts had reminded her why she'd acted in the first place. Now she needed to make things right with her family, especially Ethan. Emily found her nephew in the living room, sprawled on the rug with his new train set, the red locomotive chugging along its oval track. His train book lay open beside him, pages creased from constant handling. She sat cross-legged next to him, her jeans damp from the snow on her boots. "Hey, buddy," she said, her voice soft. "How's the train doing?" Ethan grinned, his earlier wariness gone. "It's fast. Want to see it go around again?" "Absolutely," Emily said, watching the tiny cars clatter along the track. She hesitated, then added, "I'm really sorry about the first train, Ethan. I didn't mean to make you sad." Ethan shrugged, his small shoulders lifting under his dinosaur pajamas. "It's okay, Aunt Em. This one's cool. And you said those kids needed stuff, right?" "Yeah," Emily said, her throat tight. "They did. But you're important too." "I should have thought about that." Ethan looked up, his brown eyes serious. "Can I show you my train book? It's got a picture of a train like yours." Emily smiled, her heart lifting. "I'd love that." As Ethan flipped through the pages, pointing out steam engines and bullet trains, Emily felt a warmth she hadn't in days. The living room, with its faded plaid couch and crackling fireplace, felt like home again, not a stage she didn't belong on. But she knew this moment with Ethan was only a start. The rest of her family, Matt, Sarah, Lila, Diane, and Tom, deserved more than apologies. They deserved honesty. The opportunity came that afternoon, when the family gathered for a late lunch of leftover turkey sandwiches and hot cider. The dining room table was less formal now, cluttered with mismatched plates and a half-eaten tray of cookies. Diane was recounting a story about her neighbor's over-the-top holiday lights, her laughter lighter than it had been, while Tom nodded along, sipping his cider. Matt and Sarah sat close, their hands brushing as they passed Ethan a napkin. Lila, scrolling through wedding venue photos on her phone, looked up when Emily cleared her throat. "I need to say something," Emily began, her hands clasped around her mug. The room stilled, all eyes on her. "I messed up, not just with the gifts, but with how I handled everything. I felt invisible at Christmas dinner, like I didn't matter. So I gave the gifts away because I wanted to feel like I was doing something good. But I didn't think about how it would affect you all, and I'm sorry." Diane's expression softened, but she didn't speak. Matt leaned forward, his brow furrowed. We didn't mean to make you feel like that. It's just life gets busy. Ethan, the wedding, work. We're not always great at showing we care." "I know," Emily said, "but I haven't been great at saying what I need either. I've been struggling, lost my job, barely making ends meet. Coming home was supposed to fix that, but it didn't. Not at first." Sarah reached across the table, her hand resting near Emily's. "Why didn't you tell us about the job? We could have helped." Emily shrugged, her eyes on her mug. "Pride, maybe. I didn't want to be the one falling apart when everyone else seems to have it together." Lila set her phone down, her voice gentle. "We're not perfect. I'm freaking out about this wedding. Matt's stressed about work, and Mom's been driving us nuts with her holiday plans. You're not the only one struggling." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, I'm not that bad." The table laughed, the tension breaking like ice under a warm sun. Tom, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "You're always part of this family, Emily. You don't need to prove it with gifts." Emily nodded, her eyes stinging. "I know that now. I want to do better. Be here, really be here." The conversation shifted, not to erase the hurt, but to build something new. Lila suggested they plan a family outing before Emily left for Boston, maybe sledding at the old North Bridge Hill. Matt offered to help Emily look for freelance gigs, leveraging his contacts in tech. Sarah, practical as ever, proposed a budget app she swore by. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. That evening, Emily and Lila drove to the Lowell shelter to volunteer, as Lila had suggested. The community room was quieter now, the holiday rush over, but Rosa greeted them with a warm smile. "You're back," she said to Emily, "and you brought reinforcements." Lila, in her red coat and impractical heels, looked out of place but eager. "I want to help," she said. "Em's got me inspired." They spent hours sorting donations, packing, care packages for families moving into transitional housing. Emily worked alongside Maria, the mother from yesterday, who apologized for her earlier frustration. "It's hard, you know," Maria said, taping a box shut. "You want your kids to feel special." "I get it," Emily said. "I wanted that for my nephew too. I'm learning it's not just about the stuff you give." Maria nodded, her smile tired but genuine. "You're all right, Emily." Back in Concord, the family gathered for a final night together. Ethan, now fully enamored with his train, insisted Emily play conductor. As they laughed, the train derailing comically, Emily felt a shift. She wasn't invisible. Not to Ethan, not to Lila, who was planning a shelter fundraiser, not to Matt and Sarah, who'd invited her to stay for New Year's. Even Diane, usually so critical, hugged her tightly before bed, whispering, "I'm proud of you." The next morning, Emily packed her car, the snow now melting under a weak sun. As she hugged her family goodbye, Ethan slipped a drawing into her hand, a train with a stick figure Emily waving from the caboose. "Don't forget me, Aunt Em," he said. "Never," she promised, her voice thick. Driving back to Boston, the radio playing Auld Lang Syne, Emily felt lighter. She'd given away the gifts, but she'd gained something better, a family that saw her, a purpose that felt real, and a chance to start again. The road ahead was uncertain, freelancing, finances, finding her place, but for the first time in months, she believed she could face it. Christmas had been messy, but it had given her a new kind of gift, herself.